watching the dash. He looked almost comfortable somehow. Cooper was already a sergeant back when I met him, and I think he knew he always would be. He was all right with it, liked the Army. He and I were both at Bragg together. Cooper was a drill sergeant at the time. One time he kept me on post for 4 straight weekends. I snorted out a laugh. Is that when the two of you got close? Weekends together in the barracks? I hated his guts back then. Thought he was picking on me. You know, singling me out because of my size. Then we hooked up again in Nam. He loosened up some? Once you met him again in Nam? No. Cooper is Cooper. He's no bullshit, a real straight arrow. But if you follow the rules, he's fair. That's what he liked about the Army. It was mostly orderly, consistent, and if you did the right thing, then you usually did all right. Maybe not as well as you thought you should, but not too bad. He told me it's smart for a black man to find a meritocracy like the Army. Or the police department, I said. Up to a point, Sampson said, nodding. I remember a time, he continued. Vietnam. We had replaced a unit that killed maybe 200 people in a 5-month period. These weren't exactly soldiers that got killed, Alex, though they were supposed to be VC. I listened as I drove. Sampson's voice became far away. This kind of military operation was called mopping up. This one time, we came into a small village, but another unit was already there. An infantry officer was interrogating a prisoner in front of these women and children. He was cutting skin off the man's stomach. Sergeant Cooper went up to the officer and pressed his gun to the man's skull. He said if the officer didn't stop what he was doing, he was a dead man. He meant it, too. Cooper didn't care about the consequences. He didn't kill those women in North Carolina, Alex. Ellis Cooper is no killer. Chapter 6. I loved being with Sampson. Always had, always would. As we rode through Virginia into North Carolina, the talk eventually turned to other, more hopeful and promising subjects. I had already told him everything there was to tell about Jamila Hughes, but he wanted to hear more scoop. Sometimes he's a bigger gossip than Nana Mama. I don't have any more to tell you, big man. You know, I met her on that big murder case in San Francisco. We were together a lot for a couple of weeks. I don't know her that well. I like her, though. She doesn't take any crap from anybody. And you'd like to know her more. I can tell that much. Sampson laughed and clapped his big hands together. I started to laugh, too. Yes, I would, matter of fact. Jamila plays it close to the vest. I think she got banged up somewhere along the line. Maybe the first husband. She doesn't want to talk about it yet. I think she has your number, man. Maybe she does. You'll like her. Everybody does. John started to laugh again. You do find nice ladies, I'll give you that much. He switched subjects. Nana Mama is some kind of piece of work, isn't she? Yeah, she is. 82. You'd never know it. I came home the other day. She was shimmying a refrigerator down the back stairs of the house on an oilcloth. Wouldn't wait for me to get home to help her. You remember that time we got caught lifting records at Spector's Vinyl? Sampson said. Yeah, I remember. She loves to tell that story. John continued to laugh. I can still see the two of us sitting in that store manager's crummy little office. He's threatening us with everything but the death penalty for stealing his crummy 45s. But we are so cool, we're almost laughing in his face. Nana shows up at the record store and she starts hitting both of us. She hit me in the face, bloodied my lip. She was like some kind of mad woman on a rampage, a mission from God. She had this warning, don't cross me, don't ever cross me, ever. I can still hear the way she would say it, I said. Then she let that police officer haul our asses down to the station. She wouldn't even bring us home. I said, they were only records, Nana. I thought she was going to kill me. I'm already bleeding, I said. You're going to bleed more, she yelled in my face. I found myself smiling at the distant memory. Interesting how some things that weren't really funny at the time eventually get that way. Maybe that's why we became big bad cops. That afternoon in the record store, Nana's vengeful wrath. Sampson turned serious and said, No, that's not what straightened me out. The Army did it. I sure didn't get what I needed in my own house. Nana helped, but it was the Army that set me straight. I owe the Army, and I owe Alice Cooper. Hoorah! 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 Chapter 7. We drove on to the sobering and foreboding high-walled grounds of Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina. The security housing unit there was like a prison within a prison. It was surrounded by razor-sharp wire fences and a deadly electronic barrier. Armed guards were in all the watchtowers. Central Prison was the only one in North Carolina with a death row. Currently there were more than 1,000 inmates, with an astounding 220 on the row. "Scary place," Sampson said as we got out of the car. I had never seen him look so unsettled and unhappy. I didn't much like being at Central Prison either. Once we were inside the main building, it was as quiet as a monastery, and the extremely high level of security continued. Sampson and I were asked to wait between two sets of steel bar doors. We were subjected to a metal detector, then had to present photo IDs along with our badges. The security guard who checked us informed us that many of North Carolina's first-in-flight license plates were made here at the prison. Good to know, I suppose. There were hundreds of controlled steel gates in the high-security prison. Inmates couldn't move outside their cells without handcuffs, leg irons, and security guards. Finally, we were allowed to enter death row itself, and were taken to Sergeant Cooper. In this section of the prison, each block consisted of 16 cells, 8 on the bottom, 8 on top, with a common day room. Everything was painted the official color, known as lark. "John Sampson, you came after all," Ellis Cooper said as he saw us standing in a narrow corridor outside a special hearing room. The door was opened and we were let in by a pair of armed guards. I sucked in a breath, but tried not to show it. Cooper's wrists and ankles were shackled with chains. He looked like a big, powerful slave. Sampson went and hugged Cooper. Cooper had on the orange-red jumpsuit that all the death row inmates wore. He kept repeating, "So good to see you." When the two big men finally pulled apart, Cooper's eyes were red and his cheeks wet. Sampson remained dry-eyed. I had never, ever seen John cry. "This is the best thing that's happened to me in a long, long while," Cooper said. "I didn't think anybody would come after the trial. I'm already dead to most of them." "I brought along somebody. This is Detective Alex Cross," Sampson said, turning my way. "He's the best I know at homicide investigations." "That's what I need," said Cooper, as he took my hand. "The best." "So, tell us about all this awful craziness." "Everything," Sampson said. "Tell us from start to finish. Your version, Coop." Sergeant Cooper nodded. "I want to. It will be good to tell it to somebody who isn't already convinced that I murdered those 3 women." "That's why we're here," Sampson said. "Because you didn't murder the women." "That Friday was a payday," Cooper began. "I should have gone straight home to my girlfriend, Marcia. But I had a few drinks at the club. I called Marcia around 8, I guess. She'd apparently gone out. She was probably ticked off at me. So I had another drink. Met up with a couple of buddies. I called my place again. It was probably close to 9. Marcia was still out. I had another couple of highballs at the club, then I decided to walk home. Why walk? Because I knew I was 3 sheets to the wind. It was only a little over a mile home anyway. When I got to my house, it was past 10. Marcia still wasn't there. I turned on a North Carolina Duke basketball game. Loved to root against the Dukies and Coach K. Around 11 o'clock, I heard the front door open. I yelled out to Marcia, asked her where she had been. Only it wasn't her coming home after all. It was about a half a dozen MPs and a CID investigator named Jacobs. Soon after that, they supposedly found the R-Tac survival knife in the attic of my house, and traces of blue paint used on those ladies. They arrested me for murder. Ellis Cooper looked at Sampson first, then he stared hard into my eyes. He paused before he spoke again. I didn't kill those women, he said. And what I still can't believe, somebody obviously framed me for the murders. Why would somebody set me up? It doesn't make sense. I don't have an enemy in the world. At least I didn't think so. Chapter 8.
Thomas Starkey, Brownlee Harris, and Warren Griffin had been best friends for more than 30 years, ever since they served together in Vietnam. Every couple of months, under Thomas Starkey's command, they went to a simple post-and-beam log cabin on Kennesaw Mountain in Georgia and spent a long weekend together. It was a ritual of machismo and would continue, Starkey insisted, until the last of them was gone. They did all the things they couldn't do at home. Played music from the 60s, The Doors, Cream, Hendrix, Blind Faith, The Airplane, loud. They drank way too much beer and bourbon while they grilled thick porterhouse steaks that they ate with fresh corn, Vidalia onions, tomatoes, and baked potatoes slathered with butter and sour cream. They smoked expensive Cuban cigars. They had a hell of a lot of fun in what they did. "What was that line in that old beer commercial? You know the one I'm talking about," Harris asked as they sat out on the front porch after dinner. "It doesn't get any better than this," Starkey said as he flicked the thick ash from his cigar onto the wide planked floor. "I think it was a shit beer, though. Can't even remember the name. Of course, I'm a little drunk and a lot stoned." Neither of the others believed that. Thomas Starkey was never completely out of control, and especially not when he committed murder or ordered it done. "We've paid our dues, gentlemen. We've earned this," Starkey said, and extended his mug to clink with his friends. "What's happening now is well-deserved." "Bet your ass we earned it. Couple or three foreign wars. Our other exploits over the past few years," said Harris. "Families, 11 kids between us, plus we did pretty good out in the big bad civilian world, too. I sure never figured I'd be knocking down 150 a year." They clinked the heavy beer glasses again. "We did good, boys. And believe it or not, it can only get better," said Starkey. As they always did, they retold old war stories. Grenada, Mogadishu, the Gulf War, but mostly Vietnam. Starkey recounted the time they had made a Vietnamese woman ride the submarine. The woman, a VC sympathizer of course, had been stripped naked, then tied to a wooden plank face upward. Harris had tied a towel around her face. Water from a barrel was slowly sprinkled onto the towel. As the towel eventually became soaked, the woman was forced to inhale water to breathe. Her lungs and stomach soon swelled with the water. Then Harris pounded on her chest to expel the water. The woman talked, but of course she didn't tell them anything they didn't already know. So they dragged her out to a kaki tree, which produced a sweet fruit and was always covered with large yellow ants. They tied the mama-san to the tree, lit up marijuana cigars, and watched as her body swelled beyond recognition. When it was close to bursting, they wired her with a field telephone and electrocuted her. Starkey always said that was about the most creative kill ever. And the VC terrorist bitch deserved it. Brownlee Harris started to talk about mad minutes in Vietnam. If there were answering shots from a village, even one, they would have a mad minute. All hell would break loose because the answering shots proved that the whole village was VC. After the mad minute, the village, or what remained of it, would be burned to the ground. "Let's go into the den, boys," Starkey said. "I'm in the mood for a movie, and I know just the one." "Any good?" Brownlee Harris asked and grinned. "Scary as hell, I'll tell you that. Makes Hannibal look like a popcorn fart. Scary as any movie you ever saw."
Chapter 9.
The three of them headed for the den, their favorite place in the cabin. A long time ago in Vietnam, the trio had been given the code name Three Blind Mice. They'd been elite military assassins, did what they were told, never asked embarrassing questions, executed their orders. It was still pretty much that way, and they were the best at what they did. Starkey was the leader, just as he had been in Vietnam. He was the smartest and the toughest. Starkey hadn't changed much physically over the years. He was 6'1", had a 33-inch waist and a tan, weathered face, appropriate for his 55 years. His blond hair was now peppered with gray. He didn't laugh easily, but when he did, everybody usually laughed with him. Brownlee